of the 1977 Youth Conference. This man I've known for some time, was in college with him for a little while, and he started out, well, didn't start out life, but he in the past has been a tank sergeant in the Marine Corps. He also holds the distinction, as many of you know who are from the north central area, of having held the largest basketball tournament under one roof on record. They had something like 70 teams at one time in one basketball tournament. He's written his own leadership courses for children, teens, and adults. So it's my pleasure at this time to introduce to you the pastor of the Hinsdale, Illinois congregation of the Worldwide Church of God, Mr. Carl Gustafson.
Well, good afternoon to all of you. I know this is the last meeting and you're all tired. Some of your eyes look like 2 bowls of tapioca pudding with a cherry in each one. But I slept all morning so that I'd be ready for you, so I'm full of energy today. It's good to be down here in Texas after the cold Chicago winter we were having. Don't you just love the Texas accents down here from wherever you're from? I went into the restaurant and the waitress said, "Y'all won't pass that water glass over here." What on earth is this? I hadn't recognized that accent. Now, I heard some highway patrolmen over in the corner talking about hail. I said, well, is it hailing outside? What is this hail? And then I realized they were saying hell. Hail. You can always tell these Texans anywhere. A good place to tell a Texan is on an airplane. I've been doing a little flying here lately. And if the stewardess comes up to somebody from Wyoming, where I'm from, and says, "Would you like to have a drink?" They have that slow Western drawl, and they'll say, "Yeah, that sounds pretty good. You bet." Well, that's the Wyoming. Then this one time I saw 2 Mexicans. One spoke English and the other one didn't. She went up to him and said, "Would you like a drink, or what would you like to drink?" And the one Mexican said, "I think I would like a tequila sunrise, you know." She said, "Huh? You know, a tequila sunrise." So she asked the other one, "What would you like?" He looked at her. "Well, what would you like to drink?" And he said, "Camara cachira, tienes que comer, cale de caguama." What did he say? He said, "Me too." That's the way the Mexicans are. They have all those words and don't say too much. Then he asked the Frenchman, what would you like to drink? And he says, "Oh, I have the Repel wine with the French fries." But then you get to the Texan and say, "What would you like to drink?" And he says, "Well, hail, honey, what you got?" "Hot dog, I ain't had one of them since I was an armadillo." You can tell, sitting right there in the plane station, listening to them announce the planes. They'll have United Airways. I say, "United Airways, flight number 66, departing from gate number 1. American Airways, flight number 27, departing from gate number 2. TWA, flight number 84, departing from gate number 4. And then you'll have Texas International. "Y'all won't get your tails on board. We about ready to leave." Good thing I remembered to say tails. I heard some of you had some terrific trips down from wherever you came from on the bus. You probably think, well, the guest speakers, they get to fly on all these airlines. They have easy times. Let me tell you a little bit about my trip to this conference. Then you'll know how bad I wanted to speak to you because of what I had to go through to get here. I went home to Wyoming, where I'm from, and my in-laws live up in Centennial, Wyoming. In fact, they have bumper stickers there that say, where the hell is Centennial, Wyoming? Nobody knows where it is. Well, it's lost out in the mountains someplace. And I got snowed in there after I was there, and I mean really snowed in. So we couldn't get out by car. We couldn't get out with a Jeep with chains on it. So my father-in-law said, well, you get your suit on, whatever you're going to fly in, and I'll put this little snowsuit over you. This is true. It actually happened just a couple days ago. So I put this suit on over a snowsuit on over my regular clothes with my good shoes, and he put me in the scoop of his tractor with my briefcase and my clothes bag. And in a blizzard. I mean, a blizzard. 50-mile-an-hour winds and the snow blowing sideways till it hits something. And we're going through these snow drifts, and I'm in the scoop of his tractor, see. And he's putting along, and we're going through the blizzard, and the tractor got stuck. So I had to get out of the scoop and try to wait until he got the tractor unstuck. Now, this tractor couldn't even scoop itself out of the snow. Using hydraulics, couldn't even get out of the snow. So we had to walk all the way back to the cabin, and I missed the flight. So I said, well, I'll try this next flight this afternoon. So he had one resort left, and that was a snowmobile. So about 2 o'clock came, and I got on my little snowsuit over my regular clothes, got on the back of the snowmobile. My father-in-law, he weighs about 250 pounds. He was on the front of the snowmobile, and he took off. And, of course, I had my clothes bag over one shoulder, my briefcase in the other hand. It must have looked hilarious. And we went across the bridge. We narrowly missed a fence post by inches. I knew my kneecaps were going to fall off because they were sitting out to the side. Narrowly missed it by inches, went into a drift, got in a wreck, turned over, and we were laying there. My clothes bag was 20 feet off to one side, the briefcase off to the other, and my father-in-law right on my leg, all 250 pounds of him. Busted up my jaw. I've got a blood blister here and cut the inside of my mouth, and we're laying there in this blizzard. And I said, well, this snowmobile idea isn't going to work. So I said, I think I'd just soon try to walk. And he said, no, get on. Well, I said, well, let's see you make it over that drift first. So he got on the snowmobile, hit the drift, and got stuck. The snowmobile couldn't even get out of those drifts. So I picked up my clothes bag and my briefcase, and I hiked out for 2 miles in a blizzard. So now you know how bad I want to speak to you. Anyway, I hiked out, got in the car, went to the Laramie Airport. We have 2 selections of airlines there at Breezefield, Trans Mountain and Frontier Airlines. I prefer Frontier because it flies a little higher than 30 feet off the ground like Trans Mountain. I got down to Texas finally, to the Dallas Airport, and found that they'd booked me on a flight that didn't exist from Dallas to Tyler. And this was about midnight, so I spent the night in the Dallas airport waiting for the flight out the next morning. Got over to Tyler and found out that nobody had sent my luggage along. So I didn't have my notes, I didn't have a suit, I couldn't shave, I couldn't do anything. So I just spent Monday sleeping in the motel room. So that's the kind of trip that I've had down here. Hasn't really been the best. But anyway, I'm here to speak about the subject of leadership. Now, for those of you who don't know, leadership is a huge, intricate subject. It's often subjective, meaning that it's up to somebody's personal opinion exactly what is involved in leadership. I could talk about leadership traits. I could talk about leadership techniques, leadership history, development of famous leaders. We could even go into the analysis of battle strategies for Genghis Khan, if we wanted to, and still be talking about leadership. So what I'm going to talk to you about are some of the primary, fundamental steps to good leadership. Primary meaning the first steps to good leadership. Today's lesson on leadership, if you learn it, will give you automatic leadership. That's something that ought to make you happy if you think all I have to do is listen to what he has to say and some automatic leadership will be produced. One of the reasons why it'll be automatic is that most people violate today's lesson that we're going to learn in leadership. About 80% of leaders violate the lesson that we're going to learn today. Last year, was anybody here last year for my lecture? A few of you were. Well, you remember that I talked about chickens, and chickens with their head cut off and running around like a chicken with your head cut off, having no idea where you're going. And I said that most people are the same way. They run around like a chicken with their head cut off, and they don't know where they're going, but they're still alive. And they run in circles, they run into things, and they finally die. Most leaders are the same way. They don't know where they're going, but they're leading just the same. The Bible has a little phrase for that, where it says, if the blind lead the blind, they're both going to fall into the ditch. I have a one-question quiz for you. Let's see how well you do on this quiz. What percentage of all people would you say are leaders? A, 1%, B, 10%, C, 50%, D, 90%, or E, 100%? You put down the answer that you think it is. What percentage of all people would you say are leaders? A, 1%, B, 10%, C, 50%, D, 90%, or E, 100%? Okay, how many of you put down 1%? Quite a few. How many put down 10%? About an equal number. How about 50%? A few less. 90%? Just a couple of people. How about 100%? The last group is correct. So if you put down 100%, you score 100% on this test, because that's all there is to this test. The answer is 100%. Everybody leads some of the time. And that's a misconception we have about leadership. We think that either you're a leader or you're not a leader. But everybody's a leader. If you're a big brother or a sister, then you have leadership responsibilities. If you're a mom or a dad, if you're a fireman, then you're a leader when it comes to fighting fires. If you're a captain on an airplane, you're a leader when the airplane needs to be flown. How about a teacher in school? Certainly she is a leader, or he is a leader at times. A minister in church, when it comes to religion, he is the leader. How about an officer in YOU? Certainly that is leadership. We all have some leadership capacity at some time or another. Just remember that everybody leads some of the time. Nobody leads all of the time. Not even the President of the United States leads all of the time. Therefore, we take on leadership roles. You know, you had Donnie Most up here, and he said that he took on a certain role, and he played out that role in a play or a television program or a movie or whatever. Well, we all take on roles. There are times when we have a leadership role. Sometimes we do it good, and sometimes we do it terrible, and many times someplace in between. But you have to lead. Do you understand that? That's why it's important that you listen to this lecture. Because you have to lead, whether you like it or not. You can't make the statement, I don't want to be a leader. You have to be a leader, just as surely as you breathe. The only way that you can't be a leader is if you become a hermit. And if you meet one other hermit, you're going to start exchanging leadership roles. So there's very little chance that you could escape being a leader. You have to lead. Most people lead with no direction, as I said before. This is in a recapping of what I had to say last year. Both in long-range leadership, like careers or child rearing, they don't have direction. Or short-range leadership, like organizing a social, still don't know where they're going. That's one of the main problems of leadership. People just not knowing their purpose, the reasons why they exist, or the reason why they want to have a social, or what they should do with their career. There's two main kinds of leadership. One is formal, and the other is personal. Now, formal leadership is easily distinguished because if you are a president, if you have a title like president, captain, general, sergeant, mayor, tour guide even, foreman, any of these things, YOU officer, YOU president, YOU secretary, treasurer, whatever the case might be. Those are formal leadership positions. You have a title. You were assigned that. You were given authority. That's one type of leadership. The other type of leadership is personal. And that is your contribution to your fellow man through your own talents and abilities and your example. This sometimes takes a lot longer to develop, through your lifetime maybe, through your career, but it's your contribution to your fellow man through your own personal qualities. Last year I said that most people are robbed of personal leadership because they get into a wrong career, because maybe they get married too early, or they get into debt, they aren't planning what they're doing, they're trapped by the society, and the society puts them into a job, they can't get out of it, they get in debt, and they're locked into doing something the rest of their life that they don't want to do. Even though I said this to many young people last year at this conference, I'd be willing to bet right now that some of the same people that heard it are now trapped in a job, a career they don't want. Maybe some of them are married. Maybe some even are going to soon have children, and they'll never get out of the rut that they found themselves in. That's why your age right now is so very important in listening to what I have to say. I said that to escape this trap and to be able to have this personal leadership, you should go places and do things and find your strengths and find out what you love and what you have ability in, and don't get trapped by the system. I want you to write down the sentence that epitomized last year's lecture that I gave. You can write this down. It's very important. Every word of it was well thought out and counts. Finding right direction is the first step to leadership. Finding right direction is the first step to leadership. Every word counts. Finding. There's a whole process in finding. You just can't start out in a direction and hope it's the right one. You have to find it. It takes discovering. It takes time. It takes patience. Right direction. Adolf Hitler was a great leader, was he not? But he was in the wrong direction. So all of his leadership qualities went only for destruction. Finding right direction is the first step to leadership. It's the first thing that you do. When somebody says, you need whatever your hand finds to do with all your might. That is not a primary statement. Even though it's biblical, it's not primary. Doing something with all your might may be working against you. May be working against the very purpose that you have in life. The first thing is to do the right thing. The second thing is to do it right. But the first thing you want to do is find right direction. In formal leadership, such as YOU offices, the same thing applies. Before doing any activity, find out why you're doing it. What is your goal for the activity? Who wants it? You just don't do something to be doing it, or else you end up like a chicken with your head cut off. In summary, a leader knows the way to go. And if you know the way to go, people are going to get out of your way, because most people don't know where they're going. They just wander around through a supermarket, through life, through anything else, to their career. They're just wandering, and if you know the way to go, you're going to stand out as a leader. Now, today, we're going to talk about the second step to good leadership. The second step. If you're going on a trip, first you must find the destination. What if Mr. Blackwell had told you, we want you to go to the YOU conference this year. So here's your money, get your bus ticket, and go to the conference. Well, the first thing you'd ask is, well, where is the conference? If he didn't tell you where it was, you wouldn't know where to go. Anytime you go someplace, you must find the destination. So you want to know how long it's going to be. Well, but the second step then is to prepare once you know the way to go. Prepare to go there. But you can't prepare if you don't know where you're going. For example, if we were going to have this conference in Great Falls, Minnesota, then you would have to take cold weather gear. If we were going to have it in Florida, you'd want to put in your short sleeve shirts. You want to know where to buy your tickets to, what you should bring in the way of grooming gear, and so on. But you have to prepare once you know the way to go. I first learned of preparation as a leadership principle from my father-in-law, the same one that took me on the snowmobile. Of course, I've only been married once, so obviously it's the same father-in-law. But I used to work with him in the hay fields. And I'd wake up in the morning and I'd see him sitting at the table. No matter how early I got up, he was already up, and he was just sitting there thinking, drinking a cup of coffee. I never knew what he was doing. But when we got out to the hay field, he had this black bag with him. That was the difference between he and I, is he had a black bag. I didn't have a black bag. One day, I forgot my gloves. He reached into the black bag and he pulled out an extra pair that he had. One day, I got my socks wet in the hay fields. He reached in and got another pair of socks that he had in his black bag. And I thought, well, now he's got his feet wet. What's he going to do? He reached in and pulled out another pair of socks. He had 2 pairs of socks in the black bag. Maybe he had 3. I don't know. Maybe he had a wardrobe in that black bag. He never would show me. He used to open it like Paul Newman looked at cards in The Sting. Remember how he was like this? He'd open his black bag the same way so I couldn't see what was in it. If something broke down on the tractor, he'd reach in that black bag and he had just the right size wrench to fix whatever broke down on the tractor. One day I was galled between my legs, and that means I started to lose the skin there even. And I was in tremendous pain, and he saw when my pants ripped that the skin was coming off of my legs there, and lo and behold, he had talcum powder in the black bag. I was beginning to wonder if there was anything in the black bag he didn't have. One day we needed a piece of rope. He reached in, he had a piece of rope in the black bag. He needed to have it cut. So, of course, he always carried a pocket knife, which I still do to this day, because he said a man isn't even dressed if he doesn't have a pocket knife. And I'll tell you, all you young men, if you ever start carrying a pocket knife, you'll wonder how you ever got along without it. It's like having an extra hand. You know, it's part of being prepared. So he had a pocket knife to cut the rope. One day I forgot my lunch. He had an extra sandwich in the black bag. I still wonder, what on earth, why did that black bag have no bottom? But the truth of the matter is, the black bag did have a bottom. He would sit up in the morning and plan out the day, and he would prepare mentally, and he would think through exactly what might go wrong. For example, when something broke down in the tractor, he knew what had the greatest probability of breaking down. So that's the wrench that he brought. He knew my own habits and how sometimes I would forget my lunch. That's why he brought an extra sandwich. He knew when we were going to be working in a field that had a lot of water laying in it. I didn't even think of it. The day before, I wouldn't think to look in the next field and see if there was water in it, but he did. So he brought extra socks. That's why it really wasn't an unlimited amount of things he had in that black bag. It was because he prepared for the entire day. And that's where I learned that lesson of leadership, of preparation, was from my father-in-law in his black bag. A person who is prepared has automatic leadership advantage over anybody else. If he's more prepared than the next guy, you have automatic leadership advantage. Just, for example, I was a young man. It says a young man glories in his strength, and of course I'm still a young man, but I was even a younger man then when I worked with my father-in-law in the hay fields, and I thought, I'm going to show this old duffer, I'll show him who's the best worker and who takes the lead. But because he always had what was necessary, I found myself continually looking to him for the answer, looking to him for what we did next, expecting him to pull it out of the black bag. And he would. And he took over the leadership role from me completely, dominated me, because he was prepared and I wasn't. It didn't matter if I had youth. It didn't matter if I had strength or desire or anything else. He was prepared and I wasn't prepared. And so I want you to write down the second step to leadership now. Remember, the first step was finding right direction is the first step to leadership. Now the second step, write it down word for word. In any leadership role, preparation is the second step. In any leadership role, preparation is the second step. I'll show you how preparation works. When I was a ministerial assistant, I think that's the title I had at the time, I saw a need for a church. All right. We had a need for a church in what I felt the area was Michigan City. So if you're from the Michigan City church, you will now know how your church got started. But I didn't have the authority to start a church in Michigan City. And I knew that there were some other people who thought the church should be started somewhere else. But I thought, after knowing the situation and talking to some of the people and analyzing it, that the church needed to be in Michigan City. So how was I going to wrest the leadership away from my superiors? The main one that I'm talking about left the church anyway, so, he isn't going to get me for this. But I said, how am I going to wrest the leadership away from them and make it so that that church can be in Michigan City? So I decided the advantage that I could have over them was preparation, because I use what is called Lakin's 80-20 rule. You can usually count on 80% of people not doing something right. And I figured 80% of the people at this meeting wouldn't be prepared. And since there were 5 people and 4 of them wouldn't be prepared, if I was prepared, I'd be the only one there that was prepared. So I decided to prepare something to get this church started. So I got a friend of mine, and we got in a car, and we drove every single road in the proposed boundaries. And we timed them at a certain speed and then calculated on a calculator what the times would be at other speeds. And we got it down to the 10th of a second, how long it took to get from one town to another town. Then we plotted out all of the people that were in this proposed church area. And we not only got their address, we looked on a map and saw exactly where they lived. So if they were supposed to live in Valparaiso, Indiana, but they really lived 10 miles from there, we had them pegged on a map. And then we drew up maps, and we showed what would be the center, and what would be the center of population, and what the percentages would be of miles driven and people in a given area. Got all this information together, and then I went to the meeting with all of this in my briefcase with a copy of it for everybody else that was going to be at the meeting. Now, one of the things you do when you don't have the authority over somebody is you let them play their cards out first, which they promptly did and said, we think it ought to be in Westville. Another guy, I think it ought to be in Valparaiso. Another guy, I don't think we ought to have a church over there. There's not enough people. Then you produce your information. So I promptly handed out all these little cards, and they said, well, I think it takes, no. You couldn't get to Michigan City in that amount of time. And I said, no, if you'll notice on here, it takes exactly 47 minutes, 13 seconds, and 1/10. See? Now, how can you argue with that? You can't argue with that. And if they say, well, I think there's not enough people here, you'll say 33.4% of the people live within this circle right here. They can't argue with that either. Pretty soon they start saying, well, how many people live here? Well, how long does it take to get there? I see. Well, I think we ought to have it in Michigan City. See? And it was. So now you know how the Michigan City church was born. Just like that. The only advantage I had was preparation. You need to do the same thing. The factors involved, you'll find out when you begin to prepare, are that you have to ask questions and discover what obstacles are going to lie in your path. If you're trying to lead a group in establishing a YOU dance, what are the obstacles going to be? You have to think these things through. And then the rest of it is hard work. Preparation takes a disproportionate amount of time to the actual performance. It's just like public speaking. The amount of time you spend in preparation is disproportionate to the short time you give the speech in. And that's something you're going to have to find out, and it might be good to write down, is that it's going to take a disproportionate amount of time. And if you find that you're not spending very much time in preparing for any activity, like as not, you're going to come up with some of the same problems they did at the Midvale Church picnic. If you think about it, one of the leaders in the country, you'd have to say he was a leader now, would be Alex Haley, who wrote the book Roots, and it was later put on television in an 8-part series. He spent a decade of hard work, of preparation for that book. You know, that's why it was a good book. That's why he is now a leading writer. One of the world leaders, Winston Churchill, said that sometimes he spent hours when preparing a speech, not on the speech, but on just one crucial sentence of the speech. Preparation, again, made him one of the great world leaders. The all-time international music leaders, you know, like Beethoven and Chopin and Brahms, spent years on a piece of music. Years on one piece of music to make it the kind of quality that it really was. Now you think back, or I'll tell you what, I'll think back to my day and the kind of music that we had, and I wonder how much time was spent in preparation, because I'll give you examples of 3 songs that were in existence when I was a teenager, and we will see if we remember any of the authors or the songwriters involved, like we do Beethoven and Brahms. One of the songs was called, I'm not sure the name of it, but when you say it, it sounded like this. Now listen to and think about the amount of preparation that had to go in to writing this song. Let's get, in the proper mood of this, because it's very inspirational. Who put the bump in the bump-a-bump-a-bump? Who put the ram in the rama-rama ding-dong? Who put the dip in the dip-de-dip-de-dip? Who put the shoe in the boogity-boogity shoe? Who was that man? I'd like to shake his hand. He brought my baby back to me. Now, how many of you remember the songwriter of that one? It didn't take a whole lot of preparation. Or how about this song? The words in it are even more meaningful. Yip, 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 yip. Warp-a-warp-warp. Boom-ba-boom-boom. Boom, dida, boom, dida, boom, dida. Heartache. Remember that one? Now the next one, I think I'll sing for you. Donnie Most wouldn't sing. I got to sing for you. Now, this one was, the group that did it was like a motorcycle gang. You know, they had these leather jackets and chains and bars and cigarettes and these DAs, you know, and the hair combed back and a little ducktail. And they come out and it goes something like this. Guy'd have his cigarette and he'd have to look cool first. Don't come too close or I'll hit you in the mouth. Don't come too close or I'll rip you north from south. Don't come too close or I'll step on your toes. Don't come too close or I'll hit you in the nose, 'cause I love you. Yeah, I love you. Yeah, I love you. Thank you. Of course, at the end, they had that cool cigarette flip. The stage man will get it. Who remembers who wrote that beautiful song in this day and age? Nobody. Nobody. If it weren't for guys like me, no one would even remember the song, right? Well, that's how preparation works, because the great songwriters are still remembered. You pay a price for anything worth having. And the price for good leadership is a lot of preparation and hard work. It's like the grasshopper and the ant. You know, the grasshopper, the story about him coming to the ant and saying, "Hey, it's summertime. Let's have a good time. Let's dance and let's fiddle and let's do all this kind of thing and have a good time." But the ant would say, no, winter's going to come and I need to work hard and prepare for that winter. And grasshopper would look at him, shake his head and say, "Boy, I can't believe this guy. You know, here we got all this summer ahead and he's out there working." Well, that's the price you're going to pay. And while everybody else is snapping their fingers to the jukebox and cruising the village and doing all this kind of thing, you know, if you really want to be a leader, you're going to have to be working hard for something that you want. Now, how can you use the leadership attribute of preparation? Let's take a few examples. One would be, an easy one just to start off, you could use preparation on a date. For example, now, I'll give from the boy's point of view because he's supposed to take the initial leadership, even though my very first date I was asked out by a girl and she did all the preparation and her mom picked me up in a little Renault and we were chaperoned and we went to the Job's Daughters dance and did the polka and all these things and afterwards they took us out for a malt or something and brought me home and tucked me in bed. No, they didn't go, not quite that far. But the boy is really supposed to take the initiative and be the aggressor. That's the way God made it to be. So let's take it from the boy's point of view and see how this would work. Now, of course, I didn't know this when I was a teenager, how to do this. I had to learn it later, and what it got me was married. But anyway, it does work. What if a boy would do some research and homework on a date before he even asked the girl out? He found just the right restaurant in advance and had the reservations made instead of saying, "Where do you want to go? Burger King or you know? I mean, I don't care, you know. Any place okay with me, you know. I mean, I don't care anyway, you know. So, you want to drive?" What if he had it all made out in advance and maybe after they went to the restaurant, they were going to go to the dance, and he had the forethought to have his buddy or his brother or something hold a parking place right in the front so he could drive up like a wheel, park in the front, get the girl out, and she just thinks all this is happening because he's a cool dude, you know, and he's right there in the front. And he practiced dancing ahead of time. You know, that's one of the things guys say, "Oh, I can't dance." That's because they don't prepare to dance. You know, they don't practice dancing. Well, he's practiced. Then he even does more research. He finds out from people who are her friends or from someone who knows her what her interests are. And he reads up on those interests so that if, you know, she likes coin collecting, he can say, "You know, I have always felt that the place they put the date on those Indian head nickels was just a shame because it's all rubbed off." And she's going to say, "Oh, you like coin collecting? Oh, cool. So do I." See? And see, he does a little research ahead of time. And he finds out what her mother and father's standards are, and before they can even tell him when he goes to pick her up, he assures them that that's exactly the way he feels about things. See? Now, what if he did all this research? Wouldn't that be a wonderful date? Of course it would, but that isn't the way we do it. I remember I was so unprepared to even date, let alone ask somebody for a date. The senior prom, the last day before the senior prom, I still didn't have a date. I didn't ask anybody. I didn't know how to ask anyone. And I was the best dancer in my senior class. I was voted best dancer in my senior class. I wasn't even going to go to the senior prom, see, because I was kind of embarrassed because I felt that guys with light hair and freckles looked funny. And, I didn't want to ask her and all this. So I didn't have a date. Well, the girl with the locker right next to mine was the homecoming queen. And all the other guys assumed, and she was head cheerleader as well, they assumed that naturally somebody asked the homecoming queen out years ago when she was 7. They asked her out for the senior prom. Nobody would even guess that she hadn't been asked out yet. So she came up to me, and, she had these big eyelashes, and she knew that I wasn't going to the senior prom, so she came up to me, and you know how the girls do, kind of like that. And she said, I don't have a date to the senior prom. Now, any guy that was halfway prepared, would seize that opportunity immediately. And I said, I don't either. And so she said, I guess I'll just be sitting home alone. And I said, me too. And inside my mind I was saying, ask her, you idiot! But she finally said, well, I guess if no one's going to ask me, I have to get to class. And I said, yeah, I'm running a little late myself. And to this day, I hate myself for it. I spent the night of the senior prom at home daydreaming of Mary Glenn, and I never asked her. Isn't that a shame? But I mean, that's why I had to learn the hard way. The girls, well, but I learned. See, I'm trying to help you guys out so you don't go through that same deal. Anyway, preparation can help you even in getting a date. How about a YOU activity? Now, this is where you really need to know how to prepare, because you're going to be doing this upcoming year, having different activities and fundraisings and dances and socials and things, or work projects. So it's very important that you know how to prepare for a YOU activity. You can get a good idea of how not to prepare from a lot of our spokesmen's clubs, from your old men. Now, I know there's some of the guys in here saying, man, I wish you would shut up. But you can't shut me up now unless Mike Blackwell comes up here with a little thing and pulls me off. But anyway, they'll get up there. And I've directed spokesmen's clubs now for years, and I've seen it in ambassador clubs, and I was in spokesmen's clubs before I ever went to ambassador college. And I've seen time and time again, and women's clubs do the same thing. They'll have a ladies' night or a men's night that's supposed to be for the opposite sex, and the men will say, I think we ought to go to a football game. And, the women don't want to go to the football game, and the women will say, I think we should have a formal dance. And the men don't want a formal dance, so they do the thing they want to do and not what the other one wants to do. I remember one guy in Ambassador Club at Ambassador College got up, and the way most guys present business, they say, I think we ought to go to a football game. They didn't figure out how much the tickets would be, whether they're available, what night it would be on, where the seats, where we're going to sit, any of these things. And no one else is prepared either, so they say, well, that's the only business. Everybody, I guess so. So we went to a football game. Actually happened. It was the Detroit Lions versus the Los Angeles Rams, Monday night football. And we went there. And the Los Angeles Coliseum is funny. It's got wings that come back. It's shaped like a horseshoe. And the football field is down at one end, and then these two wings extend back, and they're clear behind the football field. Well, we were seated clear up at row 170 or something like this, at the end of the wing, and you couldn't even see the football. You had to read the score in the paper the next day to see who won the game. It was ridiculous. We were cold. We couldn't get down there for all the traffic. We stayed up too late. We missed supper because we had to get an early start. We depleted the treasury, and nobody liked it. So that's how not to run an activity, because these things weren't prepared for. But if you're well prepared, and this is what I tell people in the spokesman's clubs, is when you present an idea of business, you should have already done the homework. And the same thing is true with a YOU activity. When should you have it? Because there may be another activity. Or if you're going to have a dance, we may have just had a dance a month ago. So you just don't have a dance. You should ask, when? When would be the right time? When is the time when nobody else is having a dance? That's when we ought to have it. What would the cost be? Is there a need for a dance? If you had 17 dances in a row, maybe you ought to try something else. What is the reasoning for it? Have people give the reasons and the logistics. In other words, how much is going to be involved in transporting this and that, and then there's the location and how much you're going to need for decoration. So the timing, the market. What is the market? Here is one of the problems that the church has, YOU included. And when I say this, I don't mean I'm now telling you about the problems of the church. I'm just talking about for good activities. And that is that a YOU group will hold a dance for the whole church, and without thinking ahead that the adults and a lot of old people are going to come in there, and they put some rock band in there with loud music, and the adults hate it and they leave. And they say, I'm never going to a YOU dance again. But the adults do the same thing to you, don't they? I remember when I first got to Chicago, they had a teen dance, and they had two 50-year-old guys playing for it, one with an accordion, the other with a clarinet. I gotta say, the kids would come up and say, hey, you know anything by the Doobie Brothers, man? And they'd say, are they related to the Mills Brothers? And, they played all this old thing. Benny Goodman was about as lively as they got. And the kids hated it, and they said, we aren't going to any more dances. So if you want to have a rock band, then you shouldn't have adults. See? And if the adults want to have an old-fashioned band, then they shouldn't have the kids. If you're going to have something for the whole church, you think it out. Who's coming? Think of the people themselves. Picture them in your mind. Say, would they like this? That's why a lot of times maybe a 50s dance is a compromise, where you can have music that at least you can dance to, and some of the oldsters like it as well. The location of it, again, is it 67 miles from the center of the church area? The atmosphere is essential. You need to think, what does it look like? If we hold it in somebody's warehouse, it's uninspiring. If we have it in a place like this huge gymnasium, and you've got 47 people coming, it's going to seem lonely in there. So you get the right size hall, and you determine what the atmosphere is going to be. And if it's kind of austere and bleak, then you say, we need to decorate it. What do we need in the way of decorations? You need to think of these things and prepare ahead of time. How about money? Do you have any capital? What's it going to take to put on this activity? One way is if you're inviting adults, Mr. Hampton, forgive me, you can sell booze and you'll make a small fortune. But that's one of the ways you can make money. Of course, I'm just kidding in that particular aspect. But what are the obstacles? You need maybe to get a little group and brainstorm. That means everybody think up what the obstacles are going to be. And then you plan it so it flows from one event to another. And that's very important for a dance. A lot of times, especially youth groups, will put on a dance and they think just having the dance is enough. Having the dance is not enough. Because if you just have a dance, people just come around and stand there and they don't know what to do and they kind of want to go home and they wish something would happen. But if you have it planned out, event to event, then you'll find out that things start happening and the people really enjoy it. Because somebody did their homework on you and their preparation on you, you're led at times when you don't even suspect it from one thing to another. This is what you have to do to groups when you hold a dance or any other activity. Now, an example I can give you is a supermarket. You don't even think you're being led in a supermarket because you don't see a guy standing out there saying, step this way, buy this product, now come over here, you ought to try this. There's nobody in a supermarket saying that, is there? They don't even have little policemen standing there in the aisles pointing directions or anything. You just wander around in there, don't you, and you get what you want, don't you? No, that's not true. Somebody did their homework on you. They make it so you have to go to the left when you get in the supermarket. And then they put all the items you don't want first. So it's right in front of your eyes and you got an empty cart. And you say, oh yeah, I guess I do want a 6-pack of pop. See? And you put that in there. They put the items that you don't want at eye level. They put the items that the little kids want, like sugar corn pops and Cocoa Pebbles, at your belly button level. Because that's the kids' eye level. See? Hey, Mommy, Cocoa Pebbles. And they put it in there. And see, the Mommy wouldn't see the Cocoa Pebbles. They're clear down there. Now, the things that you absolutely have to have, they hide those. Because they know you're going to get them anyway, if you have to ask for them. That's why you'll see the flour and sugar and all these things down on the bottom levels, don't you? Then the pure junk items, National Enquirer and little sale things of Lifesavers, where are they? Right before the cash register. When you're standing there in line, you got nothing to do, you're waiting and you look and there's a magazine, and it has some sensational headline. You pick it up and you feel guilty for reading it, so you put it in the basket, pick up some Lifesavers and still don't have anything to do, and you pull over and get a sale on batteries, which are going to rot your cassette recorder because they're old, and all this. You put all this junk in there because they know at the very end you have to have, somebody led you. You see that now? They led you. And you didn't even know it. That's one of the secrets of leadership. If you prepare a YOU activity the same way, thinking it through, analyzing what is it that adults like, what is it that teenagers like, what is it that kids like, you can do the same thing to them, and they'll go through, and they immediately have to turn to the left, and lo and behold, you have a bar. And then they have to buy a drink, and they come over, and you've got the next thing set up, and you have one activity after another planned for them. And they go through the evening, they had a good time, and they think it was accidental. It was because you did your preparation, your homework. That's the way to make a YOU activity work. Plan it out. Think of that supermarket example. A third area for using preparation is your career. Now, I know that Mr. Oberlander has already covered career aspects, but maybe not in this exact light. If you want to become a leader in society, you've got to prepare now. Right now. There's a book out called Tobacco Road. Anybody in here read Tobacco Road? Nobody. They had a song out one time on Tobacco Road. But it was about a poor family down south in Georgia. And it was about a little boy named Billy Cart. No, that wasn't it. There was a little boy down there. And it starts off, and this little kid is dreaming, see? And you can just picture this poor little kid, barefooted, down south, hot day, clothes kind of in rags, a miserable old house, and they raised some rutabagas in the backyard. And that was all they had for sustenance. And he has an old raggedy ball in his hand. And he takes the stretch, and looks over it first, rears back, fires the ball against the house, and knocks another shingle off. Because they have poor ways, they don't care about the shingles. They're all falling off anyway. And he's dreaming. He says, someday I'm going to be a baseball star, a pitcher. See, and he hears the crowd in his ears. There is no way that kid is going to be a baseball star because he's not properly preparing. He has to prepare if he wants to be one. And as the story goes on, it shows at the end of the book that the kid's grown up, and even though he loathed everything his old man stood for, because he didn't prepare to be different, he ended up exactly like him. When the house burned down around his mom and dad and killed them both, his ambition was, well, maybe I ought to plant that lower 40 with rutabagas. See, and he was right back, and that's the story of the book, is that when poor people have poor ways, they end up in the same rut as those that went before them. And you may not like what your parents stand for. I don't know. Maybe you don't like what some of the things in society stand for. Maybe you want to attain some height and become something or be a leader. But if you're not preparing for it, you're going to be just like that kid in Tobacco Road, and you have no more chance than he did. That's why it's important when everybody else is goofing around, you need to be preparing. Look at I know myself, I still have a goal to be a writer. And I know that if I want to be a writer, I just can't dream about it. I got to practice writing. I got to read about writing. I must take classes in writing. I have to counsel about writing. I have to write letters. I have to write in my journal. I have to write articles. I have to write and write and write if I ever want to be a writer. Otherwise, I won't be one. You need in your career to make your preparation more specific toward your career as you narrow down your lifetime goals. In other words, last year I said, don't decide on a lifetime goal too soon. It may be the wrong one. It may not be what is really you. But you can start off something like this. Maybe you say, well, I know that I like people, and I like to work with people, but just exactly what I want to do with people, I don't know. Therefore, you can begin to prepare in a general person sort of a way, learning about people. Not, let's say, in a technical way, chemistry and physics, mechanics, things like this. You take the people side of things as opposed to the technical, mechanical side. You decide that what you like about people is communicating with people. Then you can begin to narrow down your preparation to maybe literature and speech and theater and journalism. And after you do that a while, you begin to see that what you really like is spoken communication. Then you can drop the literature and the journalism and the other because you're concentrating now and preparing more for the spoken communication. Finally, you realize that instead of mass communication to other people, spoken, like I'm doing to you right now, what you really like is individual communication. And maybe you finally settle on counseling. You'd like to be a counselor. Then you can take the courses on psychology and counseling and so forth. So you see how that dovetails? While you're very young, you just get a broad area that you're interested in and try to experience as much as you can. And then as you narrow down your lifetime goals, you narrow down the preparation for it. If you think about it, Mr. Herbert Armstrong did this very thing. And he said in his autobiography that the entire autobiography was nothing but a record of his preparation for the ministry. The whole autobiography is just a record of his preparation. And you think about that, the countless years that God prepared him for something. And, of course, it was justifiable because he is now one of the world leaders in the world that you live in today. You can count on this. While you're preparing, everybody else is going to be dribbling basketball, snapping their fingers to the jukebox and cruising the village. I know I did these things. And I must have shot 1 million basketballs when I was in high school. Just all my practice time. I'd come home from school and I would shoot for hours until it got dark. And then we turned on this little miserable light under the backboard and we just kept shooting and shooting. I had a shot that, every time I shot, I just knew it was in. Now, if you saw me play basketball today, you'd swear I never shot a basketball in my life. No, I know basically how, but the shot isn't there. What good did it all do me? How does it help me with my family? How does it help me in my life? How does it help me with my lifetime goals? It doesn't help at all. Am I saying never shoot a basketball? No. What I'm saying is that if you do things that are non-productive overboard and not the things that really count, you're getting behind the 8 ball. Now, I was a master at cruising the village from Kingsburgers north to Kingsburgers east, and we would just cruise and get 50 cents worth of gas at a time and listen to the rock and roll that was on the radio at the time and wasted countless hours. And when you're doing that, you're losing your ultimate leadership potential. I often wonder if I had only done something practical, anything, I'd be better off today than I am, even if I'd have learned how to electricity works or how to build a bench or something like this. But we do tend to waste our time during preparation years. I only feel good about asking God for something. This is something that kind of bothers me about church people. And I don't mean Worldwide Church of God church people, even though I include them. I mean all church people. They come into a church and they begin to get superstitious. And anything good that happens to them, they say, God did it. Anything bad that happens to them, it's a trial by Satan the devil. And that isn't true. God is allowing us to do it. If I hear a minister say, I didn't prepare because I just let the Almighty tell me. I just let Him put words in my mouth. So I just kind of got up here and let the Spirit move me. Now, I think that's crazy. I don't think God's going to help somebody like that because God doesn't respect people if they don't prepare, and yet they ask Him to bail them out of some emergency. I like to ask God for help when I say I've done everything I could. I prepared to the best of my ability. And now if there's anything else I need, now will you help me? We used to have a kid in high school named Abel Garcia. And we would go to the lunch hour. And Abel Garcia would open his sack lunch, and we'd open our sack lunches. And he had a sandwich that we later coined the Abel Garcia sandwich. And in that sandwich was 2 pieces of white bread and 1 piece of bologna. No butter, no mayonnaise, just one of those round pieces of bologna and 2 pieces of white bread. And he'd sit there and eat it, and he'd make funny sounds because there's no moisture, He'd be like this. And we said, he's got an Abel Garcia sandwich. Now, we had a deluxe Abel Garcia sandwich, too. That was putting a piece of American cheese on the bologna, and then eating it. And so we used to laugh at Abel Garcia, and we didn't feel sorry for him because he had access to the same supermarkets we did. He could have prepared his lunches a little bit better. And we didn't feel sorry for him because he ate these Abel Garcia sandwiches. Well, I don't feel sorry for the youth of our country or for the youth of our church. You might say, okay, I don't like you anymore. Maybe you didn't anyway, I don't know. But I don't feel sorry for you. I don't feel sorry for any teenager of any age. Just like I didn't feel sorry for Abel Garcia, because the opportunity to achieve in this country, in this age, is just fantastic. It's unreal. There's no excuse for eating Abel Garcia sandwiches in leadership, in achievement, and anything else. No excuse for it. And if people say, my mom and dad this and that, there comes a time when you got to quit blaming the church, quit blaming your mom and dad, quit blaming everybody else, and say, hey, I'm this old, I got to take stock in myself, and I have to get going. And the responsibility is on me. This is a land of opportunity, a land of abundance, and I'm going to make something out of it, and I'm going to be somebody. We have a country that is unrivaled. Do you realize that we have greater opportunities than King Solomon? Not even King Solomon could bring in the best singers and the best bands into his living room at the turn of a switch. And if we don't like the best band in the country, we can turn them off with another turn of a switch. It would have taken, just for what we have in the way of a blender, it would have taken a servant to come in and throw eggs in and go like this and beat on it and everything else. We just throw it in a blender and go, and so we got this drink made. And we have all these things at our fingertips. Not even King Solomon could walk in a room and flick a switch on and have lights come on and be able to turn the lights up and down, have music come on, all these kind of things. We have greater possibilities and luxuries than the kings who have ever lived. And sometimes we take it for granted. And in our lives and the opportunities we take advantage of are just like Abel Garcia and that miserable bologna sandwich. Okay. But we live in this tremendous country with freedom and the ability to become something like no country has ever had before in the world. We can travel the entire world. We can make England in a few hours now. Europe. If you want experience, before it would have taken months by wagon train to go a few hundred miles. Now you can travel around the world in hours. It's fantastic what we can do. You want to be a leader in writing? You can have your book published so millions of people can read it. Whereas just a few centuries ago, they didn't have printing presses, and no matter how much talent you had, your writing would be only discovered by a very, very precious few people. The ones that could get hold of a copyrighted manuscript written by hand, and then most people couldn't even read it, so it didn't matter if you had talent. Nobody could discover it anyway. And now millions, if you want to be a writer, you want to be a leader in that field, millions, maybe multi-millions of people can read the product of your creativity. How about communication? Now we have television, radio, satellite television, where you can be seen around the world. Again, the leadership opportunities are unreal. The technology. If you have an idea and you want to be a leader in a field, technology can mass produce it by the billions. So everybody can have your idea. Again, just fantastic. If you want to be a preacher, you can speak to more people than Jesus Christ ever thought about. You can be have greater audiences than Jesus Christ. And He did say, you'll do greater miracles than these. Of course, He probably foresaw the time when we would have such a thing as a microphone. You know, it's fantastic to be able to talk to this many people at one time through the instrument here that was invented, the microphone. And we can talk to 10,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people at the same time. Do you want to be an orator, a speech maker, a preacher? The leadership possibilities are just frightening. And counterpoised against this beautiful world that we live in of abundance of opportunity is the greatest need for leadership that the world has ever seen. Now, here I just made a statement that is, the need for leadership is the greatest the world has ever seen, and I can count right now half a dozen people sleeping. That just, as Dean Blackwell would say, that ought to blow a man's mind. It does. It blows my mind. To be able to think that we're talking about the greatest need the world has ever had, and you can sleep through it. Now, hang in there. It's 4 o'clock. I can't go any farther than 4:30. Just 30 minutes. Just bear it, and you'll be on that bus sleeping all the way back to wherever you came from. Hang in there. What I've got to say is important. Nations are starving. We've got little kids with distended bellies and their eyes popping out. We have whole nations victims of ignorance and poor ways. People in Mexico, I've been there, I've seen them living in cardboard boxes. Where do you live? Did you think your house was bad? In Mexico, they live in a discarded cardboard box thrown off of some refrigerator. Live in there. Chickens run around with no feathers on, that they're supposed to eat. And we have this kind of a world around us, African nations butchering, torturing, ravaging each other. Terrorists blowing up airplanes and people. Everyone and his brother getting the atom bomb or nuclear weapons, with the possibility of organized crime and terrorists getting the nuclear weapons as well. So we have the greatest need for leadership we've ever had. And in the meantime, right in the midst of it all, is the United States of America, bobbing around lazily in affluence, fat and corpulent, waiting to be destroyed. And in the midst of all of that is God's church crying out to this world a warning. Never has there been a time or circumstances like these where your leadership could be so greatly developed and at the same time so sorely needed. You may be sitting there thinking, are you talking to me? Did you see the movie Rocky? Is he talking to me? Is he talking to me? I'm talking to you. You saying, I'm just a kid. What do I have to offer? You don't realize how much you have to offer. I want to tell you about a woman, an elderly woman, who, if anybody could say they didn't have much to offer, it would be her. After you hear her story, I think you're going to realize how much you have to offer. She was one of the best leaders in the Hinsdale, Illinois church. An elderly lady. Now, not only was she a woman, which is one strike against her. Now, the women are saying, oh, but that's true. Because, and I'm saying that from the women's plus factor. Because men do still dominate, and there are such things as chauvinist pigs in the country. And it's harder for a woman to really get the leadership opportunities. But this woman didn't let that stop her. She was also elderly. She'd lost her vigor and her youth. She was also a foreigner. She came from Germany. And she had to learn a new language in the United States of America. She was also poor. She didn't have any money when she came over here. So anything she had to scrap for. She also, after she was married, found out that her husband was an alcoholic. And we've heard about alcoholics at this conference. And instead of deserting him like many would, she stuck by him and she made it work. One day, she never complained about this, but one day I was called to the hospital to anoint her because she had heart failure. And she had a bad heart. And it weakened her dreadfully. And yet she never even told anybody. So on top of everything else, she had a bad heart. And yet when she came into the church, even though she was new, and she could say, I can't lead anybody, I'm new, I got all these problems, and I'm old, and all the rest of it, she started to show her leadership by holding the best parties of anybody in the church. She planned them start to finish. She did her homework. on exactly the right date to hold these parties. She even did her homework on deciding the chemistry of the people she should invite, who would get along with who. And then she invited only certain people that would always get along. She even went further and analyzed each personality and decided what would embarrass them and what wouldn't, so that she wouldn't have activities that might embarrass them or make them feel funny if they came to her party. She wanted them to thoroughly enjoy it. She prepared thoroughly by sending out engraved invitations. She had just the right food, and if somebody she knew didn't like something, like I didn't like chicken, she had a substitute. She always had this thought out. The decoration of the place had a theme to it. So the minute you walked in, you could recognize the theme. And everything in it was timed perfectly. From the time you walked in until you left, she had you going from one thing to another. The party was all planned out. And she became recognized as the leader in that sense. And it was more than just having a party, because she drew people together in the church. And she gave people a sense of teamwork. And she became a pillar in the church. Her secret was what I've been telling you today: thorough preparation. Now, she has all the disadvantages. Look what you have. You're young, and you're strong, and you're healthy, and you're alert, and you're educated, and you're talented. You were born in this country. You know the language. You have so many advantages. And you think about her. Her name was Mrs. Emma Sack. You think about her and realize what you could do with the advantages that you have. All she needed was someone to believe in her. I remember when just this last Feast of Tabernacles, her husband decided they were going to move to Oregon. Now she's someplace out in Oregon. And she was afraid. She'd never been anywhere since she'd come to Germany except Chicago. And she was afraid. And she called me at the feast to come over and anoint her. And she was crying and almost sobbing and shaking, because it was frightening to her. And she usually didn't show anybody these weaknesses, but now she needed someone to believe in her. And she asked to be anointed. And the minute I came in, she hugged me very tight and wouldn't let me go. Just hugged me. And she had that frail little body next to mine. And I could tell as she was scared. And I anointed her. And when I anointed her, I was looking into her eyes, and she was crying. And now if you think that her example isn't inspiring enough to you to decide that, yes, I can lead, I can do what she can do, and more besides, because I have so many more advantages. If you don't think that's inspiring enough, then realize one more thing about Mrs. Emma Sack. She was, just like Tom Sullivan this morning, totally blind. Now think back on all the preparation that she did for things, and how hard it must have been, and how many hours she must have spent to prepare so that she could be a leader in the church. You think of an example like that and go back to your YOU group and ask yourself if you can't be a leader and if you can't use this principle of preparation. Now I have 20 minutes left, and I don't think I'll open it up for questions yet. I know I'm the last speaker, and there is something that I think should be said to you. And I want to depart from the lesson for a minute. Remember I told you that Mrs. Sack, all she asked was that somebody believed in her. And then she was willing to do all the work, all the preparation, everything that was necessary. You know, I feel that that is very important for anybody, to know that somebody believes in them. I had a warrant officer, the oldest warrant officer, active warrant officer in the Marine Corps when I was in. And one day there was a big landing craft stuck on the beach of Oceanside, California. And I drove a tank retriever. And at the time I was a lance corporal, I was pretty low in rank. And because I was a lance corporal, the sergeant said, you have to take what is known, it's a big hook, it's called a snatch block, and it weighs 150 pounds. 150-pound snatch block. Now, if some of you guys think that you're strong, see how far you can carry that snatch block. Anyway, we had to take this and hook it on to the struts that went around the propeller of this big landing craft that was stuck on the beach. It was a public beach now. There were all kinds of sunbathers all over the beach that were laughing and pointing their fingers at this guy who'd mistakenly got his landing craft on the beach. So I came out in my tank retriever, which is a wrecker for tanks. Big old thing with a 1,000 horsepower engine, and it has a cable on it that's about 2 inches thick. And so we got this snatch block down, and got it as far under the landing craft as we could, but then the tide started coming in. And it washed the water clear up past the propeller. And so we wondered, how on earth are we going to get this snatch block hooked to the struts around that propeller? So the warrant officer, or actually he wasn't there yet, just a sergeant, he said, Corporal or Lance Corporal Gustafson, you get down there and put that snatch block. And wait till the tide came in. When the tide came in, it lifted up the snatch block so that it would carry it a little bit further. Maybe I could put it around those struts. Only one thing I forgot about is that when you get salt water up your nose and in your ears and your eyes, it stings and it tastes horrible and you get panicky, especially when you see this tons of steel right over you and you wonder if it's going to wash back and crush your skull. And I kind of got panicky under there. And I came out the first time coughing and sputtering. I said, I can't get it on there. And the sergeant said, you better get it on there. So I said, oh, all right. So I, went back down there and a wave of panic hit me again. Now, I don't consider myself to be a coward, and I kind of hate to even say that I was panicky, but I was. And I venture to say most of you would have been also. And those the feeling of ocean waves anyway is awesome. And then when it comes under that landing craft like that with 150 pounds I'm supposed to be pushing on there, it just produced a feeling of panic. Well, the warrant officer was off to the side. And all the people on the beach were watching very quietly, just staring at me to see if I was going to drown or get it on there or anything else. And he could see I was panicking. So he came up to me and he said, boy, he said, you're representing the United States Marine Corps. Now, I'm going to tell you something, boy. I know you. I've watched you. I believe in you. And I believe you can get that snatch block on there. And he said, now, you can do it. I'd rather see you die than not do it. So I said... I can do it, sir. And he said, you can do it. So I got down there and I lifted that snatch block and the waves came in and I sputtered and I wanted to get out. And he said, you can do it. And I said, I can do it. And he said, you can do it. And I said, I can do it. I inched it up and I'd sputter and cough again. And I'd hear his voice saying, you can do it. And all the way until it finally got on there. And I came out with this wave. It looked like a seal or Jonah or somebody, the fish coming out of my mouth. No, I didn't have a fish. But I came out and this warrant officer... the people cheered on the beach and they were, yay, all this kind of thing. He was so happy that I made it and I represented the Marine Corps. He was hard and crusty and salty. He did something completely out of character. He ran up and he just hugged me. And he said, God, I love you, boy. Like this. And he stepped back and he had tears in his eyes. And then immediately realized what he did. And he said, get back in the Jeep. But I knew that he was proud of me. And I felt from that time on, I said, I can do it. All I need is somebody to tell me I can do it. Well, my brother had kind of the same feeling. My brother and I are very close. When we went into the Marine Corps together, my wife, after a while, became pregnant, and it would have been my first child. And two brothers can't go to Vietnam at the same time. And I knew that if I went, I would miss the birth of my firstborn, and also I might be killed and never see that firstborn. So my brother volunteered, even though he was in the machine guns, he volunteered to go to Vietnam so that I wouldn't have to. And he was that loyal to me. He got over there, and I'd been his big brother, telling him what to do since he remembered, even when we were teenagers. I'd go in and say, I want a Baby Ruth candy bar, and he'd say, me too. Whatever I did, he did. He was alone for the first time in Vietnam, and he did it as a sacrifice for me. And not just for me, but for his country, because he believed in his country and what it stood for. And he went over there with some pretty high ideals, and he felt like I did with Warrant Officer Kuntz, that he was being backed and that people believed in him. And he went over there and immediately found a guy that looked like me. About the same height, same weight, light-colored hair, same complexion. And he immediately took to this guy because it was his new big brother, and he liked the security of having this brother. And he talked to him, went places with him, and he came to find out that this guy, too, had a pregnant wife, only she was back in the United States. She was going to have their firstborn, only he didn't have a brother to go to Vietnam for him. So he all the more wanted to be protective of this guy. Well, one day they were out in a rice paddy, and they were attacked by the North Vietnamese soldiers. And my brother said when there is a bullet that is a narrow miss, it sounds like fingers popping, like this, because you can hear it right out of the barrel of the gun. If it's far away, it might whine or whiz. And he said when they opened fire, it sounded like this, all around their head. And they dived down, but this guy that looked like me froze, panicked, just froze. And my brother screamed at him, and he said, "Get down!" And everyone was screaming at him. And he got hit with a bullet in the wrist. And just fear went through them all, and yet they were helpless to go out and help him because he was standing there alone with the bullets flying around him, and then another bullet hit him in the back. But he still stood there. And then another bullet hit him in the head. And the firing became so intense, of course he collapsed, he was dead. The firing became so intense that the other Marines left the area, but my brother didn't leave. To him, that was me out there. And this is the kind of loyalty he had, and this is the kind of belief that he had in his principles. And he waited there and waited until dark. And then he slipped out there, and rigor mortis had already set in on the body. The first thing he did is put his finger in the hole in the guy's wrist. And it gave him a sickening, nauseous feeling. He pulled it out. He picked the guy up on his shoulders, and he weighed quite a bit more than my brother did, and he began to carry him back to camp. And he carried him, and he half drug him, and he put him down, and he carried him all the way back to camp, sobbing and crying, and thinking of this guy as me and the situation and what a tragedy it was. When he got back to camp, this is why truth is sometimes more terrible than fiction. There was a telegram waiting for the guy that he carried back that said, "Your firstborn son was born today." Well, my brother did that, thinking of me, and I was able to have my firstborn and 3 since then. But he did it for more than me. He had this kind of a loyalty, and it's the kind of a loyalty that I can't, put down on writing or tell you about in words. Sometimes when I look in my brother's eyes or think about him, I realize that it's the kind of loyalty you can just feel and know that it's there. And be glad that it's there. And to this day, I know my brother would do anything for me and me for him. But my brother had the same kind of loyalty for his country and the people around him where he grew up. The man that ran the grocery store and the postman and the fireman and the school teachers and the mayor and everybody else in the town and all of our neighbors. And he thought, I'm fighting this war for you guys. I want to protect you and my country. And he ate monkey meat and everything else. He got warts on his hands and arthritis, and his teeth began to rot out. He got shot in the leg, and they operated poorly and left it infected, and it exploded, and he had to go to a hospital, but he refused to be sent back to the United States because he believed that others were backing him up. He got back to the United States. He went back on leave, and I guess maybe he'd watched too many World War II movies or something. He kind of expected a band to play or somebody to congratulate him. But you know what the people who were supposed to be believing in him said to him, and you know this is true, you've seen it in the years since. They said, "You were a fool to go over in that stupid war." He had to march then against a group of hippies that were carrying a North Vietnamese flag, and they threw eggs at him. And then dumped flour on the backs of the soldiers while the eggs were running down them, carrying this Vietnamese flag that he was supposed to be defending his country against. These were his own people, the ones he was fighting for, the ones he thought believed in him. And it turned him off completely, and he became bitter, and he didn't like society any longer. And he kind of became a recluse, became a mountain man for a while, and now he's a lonely cowboy out in Wyoming, and he doesn't have much truck with anybody, just cattle. And he leaves everybody alone, and they leave him alone. But what I want to say to you is that you don't have that same situation. And sometimes I know you feel that way. You as young people in the Church of God, and I know I've talked to the directors of YOU, Mr. Thornhill and Mr. Blackwell, and many of the other ones that are involved in it, and I've talked to your ministers, and they sit back here, Mr. League and Ryer and Bob Boyce and all the rest of them, and they believe in you, and they're loyal to you, and they love you. And I know, and by God in heaven, I know that they support you, and they do, just like Warrant Officer Kuntz said to me, you can do it. And when you set your mind to be a leader, we know that you can do it, and we'll back you up in that, and if you don't believe it, you wouldn't even be here. We're investing in you. We're preparing for your future. And this church loves you. And this church supports you. You know, we're going to go through some mighty scary things together in the future. Your generation and mine. And we want you there with us. And we want your talents and your abilities and your leadership to show the way to the world tomorrow. So I want you to remember Mrs. Sack. Remember the lesson of preparation. And you go home now and you show those other kids where it's at. And lead them to what will truly be the best year ever in YOU.